Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be looking into something pretty impactful, all of President Trump's executive orders in just his first week back in office.
A lot of them.
Yeah, NBC Chicago put out an article just the other day outlining all of them, and wow,
He wasted no time.
not at all. I
Right.
mean, so many of these are already making headlines.
Yeah,
And they cover everything from trade and immigration to how the government works.
right. And it's a lot to sort through.
Oh, yeah, involving Elon Musk and all that.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting.
Definitely a turbulent term ahead. Maybe we should start with immigration and border control, since that seems to be getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. The language in that order is very strong. He's talking about an invasion and using the military to enforce immigration laws.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal. Usually the military can't be used for law enforcement within the U.S.
Yeah.
That's because of the Posse Comitatus Act.
Posse Comitatus Act.
Yeah, it's a law that prevents the military from being used that way. And it's been around since after the Civil War to limit the federal government's power over the states.
Right, so using the military at the border, that would be a direct challenge to that law, right?
It could be. Yeah, and it'll probably face legal challenges from groups who say that it's overstepping the president's authority.
And on top of that, he's also trying to change the whole idea of birthright citizenship.
That's right. The order is aiming to deny automatic citizenship to children born in the U.S. if their parents are here illegally, even if the kids themselves meet all the other requirements for citizenship.
But hasn't that amendment that guarantees citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil been around for like over 150 years?
It has, and it's been interpreted pretty consistently, so it's going to be a very tough legal battle to change that.
Yeah, for sure.
It really touches on those fundamental questions we have about citizenship in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see how it all plays out.
And then there's also the whole thing with sanctuary cities again.
Yeah, it seems like a repeat of his first term. Basically, he's threatening to withhold federal funding from cities that have policies to protect undocumented immigrants.
So what exactly does that mean for those cities?
Well, it could really impact their budgets for things like schools, infrastructure, and social services, all kinds of important things. But it also raises some really complex legal questions.
Didn't something like this happen during his first term?
Yeah, several courts blocked him from withholding those funds from sanctuary cities back then.
What was the reasoning there?
They said it went beyond the power of the president.
Interesting.
Seems like we're headed for a lot more legal battles on this.
Yeah, so it sounds like immigration policy is definitely a major focus again.
Oh, without a doubt, it was a cornerstone of his first term, and it looks like it will continue to be so.
Okay, so lots of potential legal issues and big changes to immigration on the table. What about the economy? Didn't he also sign a bunch of executive orders about trade?
He did. There's definitely a focus on trade deficits, particularly with China. Seems like we might be in for another round of tariffs.
Oh man, those tariffs from his first term, they really caused prices to go up on a lot of stuff.
They did.
Everything got more expensive.
Well, tariffs are basically taxes on imported goods,
Oh, right.
and often those costs get passed down to us consumers.
I see.
So, yeah, we could see prices go up on everything from electronics to clothing if those tariffs go into effect.
And what about that stuff I saw about USMCA and even the TikTok ban coming back?
Yes, he's ordered a review of the USMCA trade deal with Mexico and Canada, and it looks like he's thinking about reversing the ban on TikTok
Yeah.
that was put in place in his first term.
So it's safe to say that he's really shaken things up when it comes to trade.
Oh, definitely. He's definitely making some moves, and it's not just about those individual deals or companies either. It's part of a larger America First approach to trade, where he's trying to renegotiate terms that he thinks are unfair to the U.S.
Which could have ripple effects on the whole global economy, right?
It's exactly. These actions could impact everything from those supply chains we hear so much about to the prices we all pay for goods.
Oh.
And it could even strain relationships with important trading partners we have.
So immigration and trade are definitely front and center. What else is in this stack of executive orders? I think I saw something about environment. Did he actually pull out of the Paris Agreement again?
He did. That was one of his first actions. And he's taking steps to increase fossil fuel production,
Really?
including opening up more land for drilling and easing up on those restrictions on emissions.
Wow. So he's not just ignoring climate change, he's actively going against it.
It seems that way, yes.
That's a big departure from what we saw from the last administration. They were all about renewable energy and reducing carbon emissions.
Definitely a shift.
I also remember reading something about the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and all the controversy about drilling there.
Yeah, it looks like those drilling leases are back on the table, and as you can imagine, All of the environmental groups are already getting ready to fight this one in court.
So more controversy and more legal battles ahead.
It seems like this is a major policy shift that's going to have a huge impact on the environment, the economy, and America's role in global climate efforts.
Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack here. We've talked about immigration, the economy, and the environment, and this is all just in the first week.
Just the first week.
It sounds like President Trump is making some pretty bold moves right out of the gate.
Absolutely. These executive orders really make his priorities clear, and it shows that he's more than willing to use his power as president to reshape policies.
And this is only the beginning.
Right. There are still so many unanswered questions about how all of this is going to play out and what the long-term consequences are going to be, but we will definitely be here to break it all down for you.
It's a lot to take in, but don't worry, listener. We'll be back in just a moment to get into some of the other big changes coming down the pipeline. Everything from those DEI initiatives to the restructuring of the entire federal government. You won't want to miss it. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. You know, it's interesting how all of these executive orders are tied together. It's like he has this whole new vision for what he wants America to look like.
Yeah, it does feel that way, like a blueprint or something.
Right.
For a very specific future.
Exactly. And one of the things that seems to be getting a major overhaul is all that diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, you know, the DEI programs.
Right. The executive orders are calling for a big reduction in those programs.
Like what specifically?
Well, they want to eliminate diversity training in all the federal agencies and cut funding for organizations that promote DEI initiatives, that kind of thing.
I see.
Big changes.
Yeah, and I've heard some people say that those programs actually cause more division than they do good.
Oh, yeah.
That they create more problems than they solve.
It's a complicated issue for sure.
Is there any truth to that?
Well, there are definitely a lot of different perspectives on it.
Yeah.
Some people argue that DEI programs make people focus on their differences instead of what they have in common.
Right.
While others say they are absolutely essential for dealing with systemic inequalities.
So it's kind of a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, it's tough. And it's probably going to be another area where we see a ton of legal challenges, especially with how it could impact civil rights protections.
Oh, so?
Well, a lot of those DEI initiatives come from laws that are meant to prevent discrimination.
Right.
So getting rid of them could raise some concerns about whether those protections are being weakened.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out for sure.
And it's not just DEI in general, right? There are some pretty specific changes that target transgender rights, too.
Yeah, the executive order defines gender as strictly male or female based on biological sex at birth.
Wow.
Which could have a huge impact on transgender people.
In what way?
Well, think about things like healthcare education and even just being able to use public restrooms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. And it seems like it's going against the trend we've been seeing lately towards more acceptance and inclusion for transgender people.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's likely to face a lot of opposition from LGBTQ plus advocacy groups and their allies who see it as a step backwards for equality.
So we're seeing some big shifts in social policy, potentially even rolling back some of the progress that's been made.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack for sure.
And on top of all of that, there are some pretty major changes happening within the federal government itself.
Oh, yeah, big time. The executive orders want to streamline government operations, cut spending, and shrink the federal workforce.
Ambitious. Very ambitious.
And I'm sure you saw the appointment of Elon Musk to lead that new Department of Government Efficiency.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, come on, it feels like something out of a movie. It's definitely an unconventional choice. Musk is known for his innovation in technology and business. But I think a lot of people are wondering if that expertise will really translate to managing something as complex as the government.
Yeah, for sure. And there are also a lot of people who are worried about conflicts of interest since he's involved with companies like Tesla and SpaceX.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Hmm.
His role in government could raise questions about whether his decisions are driven by his own business interests.
Right.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
And then there's the whole federal hiring freeze, the push to get everyone back into the office and making it easier to fire federal workers.
That's a lot.
What's the reasoning behind all of that?
Well, the administration says that it's necessary to cut down on government spending and make things more efficient. They think that a smaller and more agile workforce will be more responsive to the needs of the American people.
I see.
Makes sense in theory.
But couldn't all of those changes also backfire?
Oh, absolutely.
Like a hiring freeze can make it a lot harder to attract qualified people. And forcing everyone back to the office could be really disruptive for people who have been working remotely just fine.
Yeah, you're right. There are definitely potential downsides.
Yeah.
Critics say that these measures could lead to a loss of talent, lower morale, and a decline in the quality of government services.
So it's all about finding a good balance.
Exactly, trying to balance efficiency with effectiveness and making sure that the government can still function properly.
Definitely a tough task.
Yeah, no easy answers there.
Well, it's a lot to wrap our heads around. So far, we've seen significant changes in immigration, trade, environmental policy, social programs, and the entire structure of the federal government.
Yeah, and we're not done yet. We still need to talk about healthcare and foreign policy.
Oh, man.
That's a lot, I know.
This is starting to feel less like a deep dive and more like a deep plunge.
Ha. Yeah, maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
We're definitely covering a lot of ground, but I think it's important to really understand how broad and deep these executive orders are and what they could mean for the country.
You're right. Okay, listener, buckle up because we're going even deeper. Stay with us. Okay, we are back and ready to tackle the last few pieces of this executive order puzzle. We've covered so much already, but there are a couple more big areas that are getting shaken up: healthcare and foreign policy.
Yeah, it's interesting how these executive orders are touching almost every single part of American life, both here in the U.S. and internationally.
It's like he's trying to completely redefine America's place in the world.
In some ways, I think he is. And the changes to healthcare are a really good example of that. One of the orders is aimed at weakening the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare.
Oh boy, here we go again.
Yeah, making it easier for states to opt out of some of those provisions and making those less comprehensive health plans more available.
Didn't we already go through this whole debate about healthcare in his first term?
It seemed like we did.
I thought we were done with that.
Well, it looks like we're reopening that whole debate again, and it could have a huge impact on the millions of Americans who rely on the Affordable Care Act for their health insurance.
And it's not just healthcare here in the U.S., right? He's also going after the World Health Organization.
Yeah, that's right. The order wants to review how much funding the U.S. gives to the WHO, and it even suggests that we might completely withdraw from the organization.
I remember that being a big controversy during the pandemic. Why pull out of the WHO now?
Well, the administration is saying that the WHO is inefficient, too bureaucratic, and too influenced by China. They think that the U.S. could be using its money better elsewhere.
But wouldn't pulling out of the WHO make it harder to deal with global health emergencies, like if another pandemic were to happen?
That's what a lot of public health experts are worried about. They say that working together globally is essential when it comes to health threats that go beyond borders, and that weakening the WHO could have negative consequences for everyone.
So big changes to healthcare both here in the U.S. and around the world.
Definitely.
And we also need to talk about foreign policy. What's the general direction there?
Well, it's very much in line with that America First philosophy. He's always talking about putting the U.S. first no matter what.
So less working with other countries and more going it alone.
Exactly. We're seeing a more assertive and unilateral approach with less focus on multilateralism and international cooperation.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure, he's put sanctions back on several countries that had them eased by the previous administration, like Iran and Venezuela.
I see.
And he's also taking a harder stance towards China when it comes to trade and security.
And what about the Middle East? He was pretty involved there during his first term.
Yeah, he's still involved there. One of the orders reverses the previous administration's decision to lift sanctions on certain groups in Israel. And he's also said that he still supports the Abraham Accords.
The ones that normalized relations between Israel and some of the Arab countries.
Exactly.
So it sounds like he's trying to leave his mark on foreign policy just as much as he is on domestic policy.
Without a doubt.
It's really a lot to take in. You know, we've talked about immigration, trade, the environment, social programs, the government itself, healthcare, and foreign policy. It's kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
It has been a whirlwind for sure. And in just 1 week,
Exactly.
it's clear that President Trump is not afraid to use his power to make some really sweeping changes.
It makes you wonder what this all means for the future.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, these executive orders give us a look into his vision for America, but it's still too early to tell what the long-term consequences are going to be.
I guess we'll all just have to wait and see.
We will, but one thing's for sure, these aren't just some abstract policy changes. They have very real impacts on people's lives.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to stay informed and engaged.
Couldn't agree more.
Don't just skim those headlines. Really dig into the issues, explore different viewpoints, and come to your own conclusions.
Because the future of our country depends on all of us being informed and active citizens.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, listener, we've given you a lot to think about today.
We have.
We've explored how far-reaching these executive orders really are and talked about the potential consequences for America's future.
As always, we encourage you to keep the conversation going.
Talk to your friends and family, read more about these issues, and most importantly, get involved.
Your voice matters. Don't be afraid to use it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.